Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Luke, aka Chaos Taylor. In this video, we're going to touch base on the melee Esper build. A lot of new changes, a lot of interesting changes to talk about. So first off, we're going to go into our abilities. My current build right now, and there's actually two being debated right now, but two different builds rather. But for now, I'm going to stick with the build I have right now, which I'll explain is Psychic Frenzy, Tier 8, Blade Dance, Tier 8, and Illusionary Blades, Tier 8. The rest of the skills I have on my bar are pretty similar to my last video. If you haven't watched that, I highly suggest doing so because I'll have a little bit of reference back to that video when I talk about, side point generation, sort of the priority, if you will. Um, the other skills I have on my abilities set is Concentrated Blade, Reap, Spectral Swarm, and Haunt. Lastly, the last skill I have on my bar is Shockwave, simply because I'm going to be in melee range with the melee Esper build. So also I've started to notice if you look at these different cooldowns on these interrupts, Incapacitate for example is 34 seconds and Crush is 30 seconds. So technically Shockwave is the lower interrupt cooldown. Couple things you'll already notice, but without me even really saying much, is that we don't have a lot of CC utility abilities like we did with the ranged build. So definitely keep that in mind if there's a situation or a boss mechanic that requires interrupts, either in a dungeon environment or a raid environment. I highly suggest against this build. Yes, you'll do more damage with this build yourself, but Wild Start's one of those games where we really need to learn to interrupt as a group and take advantage of those moments of opportunity where your whole group does more damage, especially in a raid. There's 19 other people doing things other than you. So just again keep that in mind. A little FYI. All right, so that's the build. All right, I would talk about my amps, but honestly, they haven't changed from the last video. So if you are interested in more of an amp setup and how I'm building there, please take a minute and go watch that video. Again, I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible for people and as informative as possible. And a little disclaimer, I'm not the best Esper in the world at this, okay? I'm still very much learning it. It's still pretty new to most everyone. So I'll give my thoughts, sort of talking about the abilities, where they fit in, how they work. First off, what's changed from the melee to ranged build? IB. Okay? This used to be a channeled ability where you stand still at ranged, and if you moved, you wouldn't be able to shoot it off. It has since changed to a melee range sort of cleave, as you can tell from the telegraph. And what it does is it gives you this stack, and the stack is called illusion, or the buff, if you will, is called illusion. So if you're running like a LUI aura, which I highly suggest, you might want to set that up to track that, so you can keep in mind, what stacks you're at, when you should refresh it, etc., etc. But basically, what happens is every time you use illusionary blades, you lose one side point, but you gain one stack. So what does the stack mean? Again, I'm going to go back and talk about the abilities real quick. So just because it's easier, I know you guys don't like me repeating what's on a tooltip, but it's easier for me to see and to explain it to you guys. Okay, so give me a sec. So go back into our set. We'll look at the tier 4 and the tier 8 of illusionary blades. First off, what you need to know is if you base this ability, it still has a 0.5 second cast, similar to kind of the sort of delay you have when you cast Concentrated Blade. It's very similar. Uh, so if you don't have it tiered up, you're going to see a little bit of clunkiness other than normal. So anyway, Tier 4 reduces that problem by making it an instant cast. Tier 8, each stack of Illusion, the buff I was talking about earlier, increases the damage dealt by your main builder, Psychic Frenzy, your main finisher, and Illusionary Blades. And it goes all the way up to 5% if you have 5 stacks. So basically, the idea around this build is to get to 5 stacks as fast as humanly possible, right? And to also continue to build side points with your other abilities, right? And get off Blade Dance. It's the same idea as the ranged Esper is that the DPS Esper in general does the more optimal damage with as many finishers as he can get off as humanly possible. Okay, so again, I'm going to talk about Blade Dance real quick, and then I'm going to kind of talk about ways that I get to 5 stacks. Okay, of IB. Now, Blade Dance. This used to be a terrible ability because it was channeled. Some people still believe it's a terrible ability because it is channeled. But they really buffed the damage. A lot of our amps weren't working with this ability prior to the patch, and now they are. And I won't go into those because, again, this is, trying to make this as simple as possible for everyone. So anyway, the Tier 4 pierces 40% armor, grants swiftness while channeling, and increases movement speed by 20%, is what the swiftness means. The Tier 8 of Blade Dance, on the channel end, you deal an additional tick of damage. Now, why is this more viable than Telekinetic Storm, would be the first question most people ask me. And let me first put this out there that unless you are in a raid with another DPS Esper running Telekinetic Storm, you will not see as huge of a difference in damage when you're running this particular build. And the reason for that, of course, is the expose that the Tier 8 gives. Now, you again won't see much of a difference simply because if your strike through is where it needs to be, then the Telekinetic Storm buff is not really going to give you much. But if you'll notice, if you look at the Tier 4 here, at 5 side points, it also pierces 40% armor, right? This one pierces 40% armor, Blade Dance that is, regardless of what side point you're at. Unless I'm reading that tooltip wrong. Okay? Also, another difference is that, if you do tier up, and I will do that just for this type of purpose, is to tier up Storm and kind of compare the damage between the two, right? Alright, let's just look at 5 side points to keep it simple. At my current AP, Assault Power, 5 side points gives me 1,671 damage per tick. Now, the damage occurs every second. Okay? 5 side points at Blade Dance, 2646 damage per tick. And it affects every 0.5 seconds. Plus, you get an additional tick at the end of Blade Dance. So you can easily see why ranged Espers would do less damage than a melee sort of centered build. Okay? So anyway, that's enough about that. Get my points back to where they need to be. Alright, let's talk about ways I get to 5 stacks. Alright, now you have a couple different options. There's one thing I do need to explain real quick before I go into that, and that is like what we were having problems with prior to the patch was IB would fall off instantly whenever we got out of combat. That is no longer the case. Um, you still have some time, uh, especially with the Mineral Overflow amp that stores 2 extra side points now, um, to refresh IB and it will go back to 5 stacks. Another little reminder, and what you'll see when I do a parse, is that if you ever forget, the buff gives you a buff for 7 seconds, by the way. And I forgot to mention that. I apologize, guys. I'm a little sick and trying to get this all down. Um, but if you ever forget to cast Illusionary Blades before the 7 seconds that you actually have the buff up there, you will lose 1 stack every second. Okay, until you, of course, you run out. Now, this is where people don't really, um, do real good with this build. Is because the general rule of thumb I kind of have told people on my build, my guide, my written guide, is that after every finisher, if you have a side point, go ahead and refresh it. And I'm still going to stick to that, because I believe that's the best way to keep um, 5 stacks of illusionary blades, get right back into your rotation or priority without having to stare at this particular LUI aura forever and actually watch mechanics of the fight, because that was one thing I had a lot of problems, and I still do. I find myself staring at the LUI aura and then, oh, hey, there's red, that's bad. So it takes a little bit more micromanaging on our part to do real good damage, because as a raid leader told me a long time ago, a dead DPS does no damage. So again, I would highly suggest like parsing and practicing this build a lot, to kind of get the nature and the rhythm, if you will, uh, of how to rotate and how to do good damage. So anyway, so the 2 ways I get to 5 stack side, I can talk. The 2 ways I get to my 5 stacks of IB or illusionary blades is simply either when I go in, I use Haunt right off the bat, and the spells like Spectral Swarm, and then I do like Psychic Frenzy. Um, you know, there's. I'm sorry. Let me try this again. Sorry, guys. Um, so basically, you have 2 ways. One way is to go in, get into combat, pop your nade, and go right into illusionary blades, using Haunt, of course, before for the magic mitigation it gives. And once you get to 5 stacks, then it's just a matter of using your spells properly, just like the range build, um, where I talked about how the hardest spell to keep on cooldown is Haunt, especially when you're casting something else. But other spells that are off the global cooldown, Spectral Swarm, Reap, CB, um, in particular, Spectral Swarm and Reap, typically can be used off the global cooldown and still give you side points. So kind of keep that in mind. Usually the best way of using CB is either 1 charge or 2 charges. Uh, I recommend 1 charge if you're already in the fight after using Blade Dance. Um, the other way is to just run in, uh, cast both side blades, concentrated blades rather, pre-pull, go into Spectral Swarm, Haunt, Reap, just throw everything, throw the whole bucket at it, and get as many side points as you can generating, so you can keep gaining stacks of Illusionary Blade. Because keep in mind, again, Illusionary Blade takes away 1 side point every time it's used. So, like I said, that's pretty much everything else. Another little important reminder, is that because of the nature of this build, Psychic Frenzy is going to do a lot of damage for you. So when these other spells are on cooldown, and say you can't, cast CB, go straight into Psychic Frenzy. Get the most of that Illusionary Blades tier 8 buff out as you can. Alright, so lastly, I think I covered pretty much what I wanted to cover. The rest is simply sort of rehashed from the last video, things like gadget, innate, things of those nature. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna try to do a parse, guys, and again, like I said, I'm not the best DPS Esper in the world, and I'll try to do the best I can to show both my LUI aura that pops up. It'll be down here somewhere, um, and kind of show you how I do this build. Okay. All right. I'm gonna do about I don't know, about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, because there is ramp up time to get the stacks and whatnot. So I just want to make sure that I show you what I do before and what I do after with my with my illusionary blades stack. So anyway, I'm going right in. All right, so you get the idea. Let me get out of combat here so I can do a couple little things that I just realized during doing that. I had forgotten to explain. So basically, it's one of those things. Like I said, it's a little bit more complicated rotation than I believe than the ranged DPS build. There are still similar problems between the both of them. Obviously you saw, I think, I remember seeing that I forgot to use Haunt one of the times I was rotating. And, you know, there's a couple times where, I didn't have completely 5 stacks all the time. So, it's what I would tell you is that um, if you feel that you're going to lose 1 stack but can get the side points to replace it real quick, let it fall off. You know what I mean? To 4, because honestly, like, it's not worth losing DPS trying to. Oh my God, I don't have any side points, so I got to get side points to use IB, stuff like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, as always, thank you guys for watching and your comments. Very supportive, very helpful for me. This is a hobby for me. This is not one of those things where I'm trying to make money and stuff. So, like always, you guys have a wonderful evening. Peace out, man. I'll give you a little wave.